During June and July at Olympic Studios, and later in the fall at Stargroves, they were working on what will become Songs for Exile. Shine a Light was cooked up in 1968 and 69 with the title Get a Line on You, but also picked up here and then in the fall of 70, also in the Sticky Sessions. Getting a lift from Billy Preston. Outstanding versions. Now, this sweet, sweet version of Sweet Virginia, another one originating earlier, a different Mick vocal version with other surprises. Bobby's fine sax solo, and Ian with the boogie woogie. Taylor sings backup here, but it's very hard to pick him out. There was a version of All Down the Line, it's thought to be, at Olympic, but I'm not sure which take it is. I am seeing that the 2010 deluxe version has the backing track with new Mick vocals on it. That might be it. Mick is the one that would present to the band to play Shake Your Hips from Slim Harpo. Carrying on later at Stargroves in the fall, Stop Breaking Down. With Robert Johnson's version from 1937, we can say the Stones brought justice here. And in Martin Elliott's book, he mentions about Mick is playing some rhythm on this, and it was later that it was Andy Johns who got Mick to add their harmonica, those blasts, and his echoing hoots later on. And they're not on this version, of course. Good Time Woman, also known as Tumbling Dice later on, was worked on during the 1970 session at Olympic and Stargroves. The start of this masterpiece, that chugging rhythm in another protagonist attracted to a lady. She's just carefree and living on fun and sex. A red light woman who likes to party. And there seems to be a common theme with them. The song Walk With Me, Wendy is not Exile related. It was thought to be recorded in the summer, possibly the fall. It didn't go over to APCO, so there is somewhat thought to be jammed later in 70, possibly. The Stones own this one. This song was released on that fully finished outtakes, the one that was leaked. A song that probably deep fans will appreciate only. A Mick-guided vocal tune with nonsensible rambling. No reference to Wendy in these lyrics. We hear how nicely how they develop a tune. You can hear pieces of several songs in here, like I'm Going Down or Traveling Man. Now the piano is a main component and said not to be Nicky, but maybe Ian or Bobby Whitlock. Midway is a Keith lead, reminisce to Gimme Shelter, slightly, and like at some points how Charlie plays that hi-hat. This next March to May 1970 tune made it on Exile Deluxe in 2010 and heard plenty. Dancing in the Light. A Loving Cup feel. Here's Jeremy Barez giving us a sample of that 2010 version. The top, Keith playing open G, but that's the version from 1970. On the bottom is Keith's open G, and this is what he added in overdub in 2010 version. Thanks to Don Was as a champion in taking this one on, the song for the Exile release and the bonus tracks. Don Was is a huge fan of the Stones and needed to be pinched that he got to work with them since 1993. This version is Mick singing with new lyrics, as this was originally an instrumental. Lyrically, not much of a Stones 70s skill lyrics.
I'm in a dark place, baby. Got to wear the grim face, baby. It got me with a heartache, yeah. Get me out of the dark days.
We'll focus now on the 70s instrumental version they did in 1970. It is Stu on piano, and it sounds like Nicky. Jimmy Miller adds percussion. A full-sounding jam. In another song, you can hear their studio jam developing. You hear Mick hollering, and the build-up at the end is divine. When I first heard this, it was the bass line that first stood out. And in Martin Elliott's book, he mentions how Don wanted to add some bass to it, but when he tried to follow along to Bill's playing, he just couldn't, due to Bill's unique pattern and style. And Don is a bassist. Leather Jacket was a Mick Taylor tune played at Olympic in June. This melodic tune has leads that are pronounced with acoustic and electric guitars. It's a polished piece, but it's kind of repetitive and is screaming for vocals. This song didn't stay in the Stones' Rolodex, but it picks up on Mick Taylor's debut album in 1979, which took him approximately 3 years to pull together. CBS Records, they weren't supportive for Taylor on this promotion. As Taylor put lyrics to it, we can see that there's some real personal side words here. Photographer David Bailey was one of the hippest in the 60s in swinging London. David would take some photos of Mick at this time. During the sticky sessions, Mick knew he had a task to finish, to get your Yah-Yah's cover shot. So he reached out to David to reshoot it. It was done on June 7th. They shot it at an abandoned runway in North London. It's about 10 minutes from where Charlie actually grew up.
Trying to recreate the album cover for the exhibition, except you won't have me leaping about, I don't think. It was David Bailey, who we worked with a lot in those days. I went to this place near where I used to live, which is Hendon, and it's on a runway, plane runway, Hendon Aerodrome. And they brought the donkey along, put a drum on it, had me dressed up. Well, actually I was in my stage clothes and borrowed Mick's hat in one of them. I don't know if they used all that. And David was up a ladder shooting down and then on the floor shooting up. Yeah. That's about it.
The donkey supposedly belonged to a local farmer and was not so pleasant or easy to work with. They tried 2 donkeys. The first one would not move or wear any of the props. Charlie's jumping was done in several takes. He had to hop off a platform a few times until the shot was made. And some people never noticed, or they just forgot, what was on Charlie's t-shirt. The album cover, the sky, was colorized in post-production to give a twilight color. June 24th, Mick's Ned Kelly film is open at the London Pavilion. Bill and Taylor joins there to see the premiere. Mick and director Tony Richardson are a no-show, but Mick's parents did attend. Critics bashed it, and they said the film didn't know whether to be art or entertainment. Aimless, dull. But kudos to the cinematographer and a few action scenes. There were some positives.
Listen to the words.
What's the new album called?
Sticky Fingers.
Let's talk about some of the cuts on it, some of the things that you particularly like, the ones that you felt were interesting to work with. You got a lot of new songs on there. You've got one song that's got a long jazz riff in it.
Yeah, that was nice. That was Can't You Hear Me Knocking. It's a bit like Going Home. And do you know what I mean? It's just a sort of unworked out thing that we just did at the end because we didn't know how to end it.
This early take really gives us the idea of what led to the final version. It has such ferocity and explains the mood and direction that they were headed. An absolute stunning piece. Mick is laying out and providing guiding vocals. They manufactured this song on the spot. They all felt this groove. Not done in one take like many claim. Mick also plays percussion. Jimmy Miller is playing that percussion instrument called the güiro. There's no need to introduce this song. We should remember Quasi Dzizornu, who assisted on Sympathy and You Can't Always Get, and now he's here, also named as Rocky Dijon. Again, they wanted Rocky on this album, and he came in with the second half of this song. Also, Billy Preston on piano, and towards the end we hear the organ. It's not certain what amp Keith used for this song, probably a Fender or maybe a Vox. There's also a echo used, a Revox. Keith using the Black Les Paul Custom tuned to open G, and Mick Taylor on a walnut brown Gibson ES355 for solo. Here you see Taylor using it when playing in the later years with Jack Bruce. Now in the deconstructing part of this song, we're going to hear Charlie, Rocky, and also Jimmy. Bill, he carries his part in this song.
you got satin shoes. Yeah, you got nasty boots. Y'all got cocaine eyes. Yeah, you got sleepy jobs now. Can you hear me knocking on the window? Can you hear me knocking on your door? Can you hear me knocking down the dirty street? Yeah.
Mick and Keith, backing vocals, and Mick Taylor also.
Ain't no stranger, help me, baby. Ain't no stranger, help me, baby. Ain't no stranger.
Now, singing in this song key was challenging for Mick, so hence the vocal doubling added to his vocals. They needed to cover up some issues.
Lyric growling, I'm gonna take you down. Lyric growling, yeah, I got fighting me down. Lyric growling, get off, I'm all around your street now. Lyric knocking, get off, all around your town.
Keith, with his magic, pulled his riff out of the air, so it goes, and the song just evolved as it played. He injects some chord changes to this groove that is taut and unpredictable. And in the beginning, Taylor plays some contrasting rhythm in the first part with that clean sound just in standard tuning. Simple but impressive chord embellishments. And we hear all the transitions playing a melodic story. They flow and they mesh with Rocky's Latin feel. Taylor bends those notes and he plays vibrato with ease. We then get Bobby Keys. He says how it was this song that gave him the start of feeling part of the band. Not part of the first section of the song though. But in the studio, as he heard him flowing at the 2:43 mark, the second part, he picked up the sax during the instrumental part as he felt something. There was no plan to keep the song going. They thought the song was done. They didn't think the tape was rolling, but it was. It was a feel, just a feeling, spontaneity with Bobby as he picked up that sax and he looked around. He was not told to do it, he just did it. He felt it was an open invitation for anyone. That's what he said. The musical interplay with all these components was a masterclass in spontaneity and sophistication. I'm going to mention something, and there's a point to it, and you'll understand why. Bob Dylan's live album from 1984 called Real Live is backed up by Mick Taylor as his guitarist. Recorded 2 days, July 5th, July 7th, and on the 5th, special guest is Carlos Santana on Tombstone Blues. July 8th, not on the album, was Taylor, Carlos, Clapton, Ian McLagan, and Chrissie Hynde, and they all played in Ireland with Bob. Mick Taylor and Carlos Santana both knew of each other's work prior to 70. And eventually, in the 70s, Carlos was hanging out with all the British guitarists as he expanded tours in the UK and Europe. And just a note, they both played together more after Dylan. And not to forget, December 6, 1969, at Altamont, it was Santana that opened and played in the daytime. Their set was interrupted with violence. You get now why I mentioned the Taylor Santana details. That Latin feel gave Taylor his window of opportunity. Now there are some that say this song was planned, a jam, and not improvised. I can only say that the ending is unusually tight for an improv ending. So when the song finishes in the studio, they all go into the control room. Bobby, he loved it. He felt so good. Well, maybe I get on this tune anyway. Mick then says something like, well, that was fun and a cool jam, but don't think it's going to be added. And Bobby just thought, oh God, I'm shut down on this one. So as they're listening to the take, they're surprised to hear the extended part was recorded. Mick and Keith were going back and forth with it. And by this time, Bobby left already and would not know until later that it was Jimmy Miller that gave his input to get his stamped approval that this take was it. As I read more fan forums, some actually just want the first part of the song and not the extended jam. And there's always that 2%. This song's interpretation, so many thoughts on it. A bottom feeder guy and his ex or a lady or a dealer. Satin shoes, plastic boots. She's a woman. Mick will sing out many shows, not saying plastic boots, but Chinese boots. Cocaine eyes, big-eyed when she sees coke. The guy's stalking or look to get her attention at her home as he's pretty drawn out. It's him at the door, not a stranger. Hey, wake up, let me in. Kick in the habit, I need your help. Prowling, growling, howling, and knocking. The song's focus is the riff and jam, and less on the lyrics for me, despite how good they are. Lick's live tour 2003 in New York City, Mick plays her harmonica for some of the sax solo. The album was getting prepared for release in '71. The legal team realized that this song and some others were not filed, which caused copyright problems. So they had to sit down and listen to the acetate pressings. For this song, there was a dilemma and a disagreement, and no one in the office could agree on a line of lyrics. The lyric was, I've got flatted or flattened feet now. Mick would tell them and insist he didn't sing that and could not remember the line on that cut. So here's a listen. Amazing how It does sound like that. I've got flattened feet. Isolated vocals, and you hear, yes, I've got a fight in me now.
I've got fight in me now.
In 1969, Sticky Fingers was a working title, but that was for an album named Let It Bleed. The darkness of Let It Bleed songs didn't match the Sticky Fingers title. There were so many loose songs, from Beggars through to Sticky, but a double album was not considered until Exile. But then again, there was so much legal turmoil going on that a double album was not considered. Mick crossed paths with Andy Warhol during the Stones' '64 U.S. tour. Their tastes, artistry, and personas were compatible, and as time went on, they would share similar social circles. It was the '69 time frame when Mick asked Andy to make a cover for Through the Past Darkly Hits album. Andy delivered his product, but Mick did not care for it, and it just ended there. Andy felt he should have received some payment for his work, at least for trying. Andy was annoyed, and this final product that he proposed was either misplaced or it was lost somewhere. It was never to be found after. Now, the time frame supposedly later in '69, Mick meets up with Andy again in some nightclub in New York City. It was here they engaged in conversation, Mick explaining the need for another album cover. Got to be certain they patched things up from their last experience, and as Andy would say, wouldn't it be fun to put out blue jeans with a zipper on the cover? Real jeans and a real zipper. Andy had an art director and a graphic designer in his factory, Craig Braun. Craig also had his own business company. Craig went into print industry in New York in '64. It was him that designed that saying on albums, includes the hit single. First one was on an Elvis album. He worked with packaging for Chess, A&M, Motown, and Mercury. He would work with Andy on the Velvet Underground's banana adhesive concept. Peel slowly and see. See what? Now, the Velvet's phallic symbol, the banana on the first album, was painted by Warhol. Braun was recruited from MGM to assist, and he added the peel to reveal of the pink banana underneath the peel. Genius. Who can resist not seeing what was underneath the yellow and black banana? This started their relationship. Braun would have several ideas for covers besides the blue jeans and zippers for the Stones. Gotta give kudos to a website called The Art of Cover Art by Rachel Cabot. Rachel does exactly that. She explains and exposes great album covers, and here's Rachel's website and information. Craig Braun that gave her a comment as she had an article about him, and then she got to interview him. And I got the information and the photos you see now. When she was interviewing in his apartment, he explained and showed some great insights of the alternate covers that he was concocting. We see here the 3-panel fold-out of the jeans concept he was working on with a life-size image. Actually, This was a good concept as the bottom panel would go between the zipper and the album to protect it. And here we see the heat-sensitive cover he was proposing. Advanced thinking for this time, using contained ink crystals. So when a warm hand presses against it, the warmth will change the green ink crystals to blue, which, the bonus is, will leave your fingers embossed in it. Connected concept of a mood ring, for those remembering that. Craig would actually sort of connect the same concept here with his George Harrison album. One other one was a triptych panel of a castle, a chateau in France. And what that is a 3-panel art showing a scene. Outside shot of a castle, you open it and you see the inside of it, displaying all the band and the equipment in the front hall. Another idea was a public execution of Mick's head cut off and 2 nude ladies in the middle of the desert reaching for his head. Braun had another idea, and that was with Marshall Chess. They had a photographer with a waterproof camera going underwater, taking some shots. I'm not sure if the Stones' heads that were blown up were in the water or above the water, looking into the pool. But looking at later at the prints, Marshall then thought how creepy and dark this was, especially how Brian died. Braun was high one night and sitting at his glass desk. He was using bamboo rolling papers. And as he's sitting there looking at the bamboo rolling papers and looking at the shape of the package, it matched an album cover somewhat. Braun contacts his illustrator and says to him, let's make this part of a Stones album, Bamboo Rolling Stones, and have a big single paper with the Stones inside. Great thought, but the jeans and zipper were already in motion at this point. Marshall Chess loved the idea. Now Braun loved the concept also, and now that you're probably thinking and saying, yeah, I've seen this before, well, he sent this over to Lou Adler, this concept, and it was part of Cheech and Chong's second album, Do a Number with Cheech and Chong, and that was implemented. So Mick liking that zipper idea and the blue jeans, and Andy moving forward on creating a prototype, a mock-up of jeans and the real zipper, and when you undo the zipper, you'll see some underwear. As Mick sees more, he starts thinking logistically. The thought starts emerging on how to plan for this and what is the cost. But Atlantic was okay with the cost at that time. Andy asked and got £15,000 for his work so far. Now with Andy and Braun moving ahead in motion with this idea, photos had to be taken. The photos using a big shot Polaroid camera was done by Andy. And the models they used, their names were never written down. But it was done at the factory, 33 Union Square West. Not only the front side was shot of the models, but the back side and models in underwear. Billy Name was Craig Braun's assistant, also known as William Linich. Billy's the designer of making Andy's factory all in silver. He was a lighting designer and a photographer. He worked at the factory 1964 to 1970 and had a brief romance with Andy. Here we see Billy's photos to help with Velvet's album. Now Billy would take some 35mm photographs while Andy was taking his Polaroid shots of these models. The factory contingency like Glenn O'Brien, Corey Grant Tippin, Joe D'Alessandro, and some others, but as mentioned, the photos were never assigned a name. Both Andy and Billy shot away together. Billy would hand over his photos to Andy, and we have no idea where these photos are. So Glenn O'Brien would later say he was paid $100 by Andy for his photo. Glenn was the underwear model, Andy's editor for his new startup magazine, Interview. Corey Tippin was a makeup artist, costume designer, and a performer. It's been declared the front and back cover of Sticky Fingers is him. Now, the models, they were told to arouse themselves prior to taking the picture. Jed Johnson lived with Andy for 12 years, and there was thought it was him on the cover. Here he is with Corey Tippin in 72. That was taken by Andy.
Cover is a picture of a guy's, just this part here. Andy Warhol designed it.
What, whose clutch it is? It's got to be Mick's, right?
Describe the cover. I can't even remember it. What is the cover?
So I got the phone call and they said, Corey, come over now to the factory. The door's open. Okay, Andy Warhol is ready for you. You know, he had a handheld Polaroid around his neck. Obviously, it's an image that anyone could claim.
No one really knows whose crotch is depicted in the Andy picture. I always thought it was Joe D'Alessandro.
There's another guy that talks about it all the time. His name's Corey, and I was the person that let people in and out of the factory. So if I didn't see you, you probably weren't there.
The Stones were in this similar territory a few years prior. The end of 67 and 1968, they were planning to launch their own record label. They were going to call it Mother Earth. The intention was an independent label so they can support other artists. An international operation in the Stones' Manic Street office. All the Stones as acting producers, and will contain its own staff. The distribution would be handled by Decca. Charlie was the one who was designing the logo. It was announced that Mary Ann was going to sign as the first act on the Mother Earth label. Now, this project failed to lift off. Still in its infancy, the idea of a new label was instead substituted by the thought of having an entire self-managing company. With all that chaos going on, Mother Earth lost focus and energy and priority. Now back to Craig Braun. His specialty was in gimmick album packaging, which totally benefited record sales. It was not a coincidence that he was chosen for this project. The Polaroids he got from Andy, the jeans, were more shadows of gray and not really contrasty of black and white. There's a newer technique known to get these stand out more. That is posterization. This process helps make light and dark tones more vibrant and creating a higher contrast, a comic-like. Braun did not want blue jean blue. He wanted black. The image on the album cover is not a straight-off Polaroid photo. Braun used several techniques for the creativity of making this cover. Here we see a poster, straightforward, but this is 1973. Serpico. Now here's the photo posterized, and this is the effect Braun was looking for. More drama and contrast. Just to show you an example of what he was looking for at that moment. And Braun also included another technique called mezzotint line conversion. This is called a basketball effect, like a dot matrix, to put it simply. The closer the dots are, the darker the area. So plenty of thought and creativity, especially for 1970, went into his album cover. Pretty ahead of its time. Inside the cover, we see Braun used color, and on it is Billy Name's stamp for Andy. Braun wanted this to get Andy his due, and that is what the listener would open up the album and realize, oh, this is Andy's art. Now time to add the zipper, which was part of the packaging design by Braun. The working zipper, the real thing. He would go to the New York City Garment District, which was nearby, to talk to the VP at Talon Zippers. Braun wanted these for free, so he tried to sell his pitch, and as they would cost 5 cents each, and he needed 1 million of them. So that's about $50,000. He told the VP, "You're going to be known all over the world." And the VP would say, "Why?" And Braun would say, "Well, you're giving me 4.5-inch zippers, and they're going to be on every one of the Stones' new album." So the VP says, "We're already known." And Braun comes back and says, "Well, you'll be known even more, bigger." "Mr. Braun, you don't understand our customers. They don't buy vinyl records. It's the garment industry. No, I'm not going for that." So Braun had to search for more zippers, and eventually he found them at Court Zippers, and the cost for them were 5 cents less than Talon's. Workers who were making the album and putting it together had to glue the zippers by hand, so costs did go up for that. So unbuckle the belt, pull down the zipper, and you got underwear. Originally, they thought of a tongue to be there, and Andy had an idea to place pubic hair instead. There was a myriad of variations of this cover through many countries. Some even had different zipper styles. Rolling Stones records need a quick alternative for Spain, one that would still apply a visual for Sticky. We know Spain had an issue and censored the cover. Spain's General Franco had strict decency laws. They would ban the crotch, but keep the fingers coming out of a can of sweet and sticky golden syrup, resembling blood. The can called Fowler's Treacle, a British refined sugar company used for baking, and treacle is the syrup. Spain would also censor the song Sister Morphine and have it replaced with a live version of Let It Rock. It was designer John Pache and photographer Phil Jude. Phil later shooting the Goat's Head Soup cover. Well, they created this new image. Some would think the image was more obscene than the crotch shot. The Argentinian album would be graced with a black opaque bag over it, created by the record company there, and everything was the same inside. In Singapore and Malaysia, the album was not banned, but it was sold under the counter, and there was no promo display allowed. South Korea had issues also. The Stones' tongue logo was debuted on the lower left corner on the back side of the album and on the record label. Also, the inner sleeve would proudly display a 6.5-inch tongue. When I was 14 years old and I learned how to silk screen in my graphic arts class in junior high school, this tongue was my first project to get that logo onto a shirt, and I wore it proudly. Marshall Chess was traveling in Amsterdam when the Stones were there for their 70 Europe tour. October 9th, 1970 to be exact. More on this later, but he'd stopped at a Shell oil gas station, and he was looking at the logo with nothing written on it, but he knew what company it was just by the visual. He needed a logo that will represent the Stones, no name on it, simple corporate branding. It was Joe Bergman, the Stones' personal assistant and office manager, that was pivotal in the Stones' chaos time frame. She would push them in a forward direction in 1970 during the Klein chaos. It was Joe that reached out to the Royal College of Art looking for an artist, a recommendation. She asked for a student that could come up with a tour poster for their up-and-coming planned tour. The tour to promote Get Your Yayas Out. The time frame of this search was approximately April 70. John Pash, in his last year of school and considered the resident poster bloke, was recommended. Pash was asked to meet both Mick and Joe at the Maddox Street office to discuss this.
A fellow student called Storm Ferguson, who was working with Pink Floyd at the time, and he'd asked a chap, George Hardy, who was in the same class as me, to draw up the artwork for Dark Side of the Moon. So, I mean, I was working on the Stones poster, and he was working on the Dark Side of the Moon image, which I think is one of the most iconic pieces of the era as well. Commission that I had from the Rolling Stones was when I was in my third year at the college, and the college received a phone call from the Rolling Stones office asking if they could suggest a suitable student to work on a tour poster, which was going to be the 1970 tour poster for Europe, and they suggested that I go along and have a meeting with Mick Jagger. So it was which obviously quite an experience. So I went along to his offices in Maddox Street, and there was his manager there, Joe Bergman, and just himself, and we generally talked about design and art, and we both found we had an interest in sort of 1930s and 40s tour posters. The response when I did the first design that I took into Mick Jagger to hopefully okay was a bit lukewarm, actually. He said that he thought that I could do better. I think it was possibly to do with the colour and composition of the one before. But I did, in the second finished poster, add some more interesting elements. I think Concorde, for one, was suddenly appearing in a sort of a 1930s, 40s tour poster, if you like. But I think what he liked about it was that it was getting away from what had been done before. In other words, it wasn't necessarily a picture of the band on the road. It was to do with touring, and I think that was in line with the basic ideas that we talked about originally. But thankfully, he really liked the last version that I did, and it went on to be printed, and I think it turned out to be quite a success for the band, and it led on to the logo commission.
There's proof here of a letter that Pash got in April 29th, 1970, confirming of the design of the poster for the European tour, but also asking to create a logo or a symbol, which may be used on notepaper at this time. They had a quick call, Mick and Pash, and he was asked to meet Mick, this time at his Cheney walk home, to discuss this logo. So Mick mentions how they need a logo or a symbol to be used on paper, like a program or a press book, a branding image. Now this story is well known, but needed for this presentation.
It was quite a short meeting, really, but he presented me with a cutting from it was actually something he found in a local corner shop. And it was an Indian picture of the Kali goddess, the goddess with a sort of pointed tongue that came straight down, and said, "This is the kind of thing that I'm into, I quite like this." And we talked about it, and he said, "Well, just go away and do something and come back and we talk some more." So I think it was almost really during that meeting that I just suddenly thought maybe use of a mouth. I just had an idea that that would be something to base some ideas for. And I went away and did some drawings, and which were very similar to what we finished up with, but just variations really of angles and tones and so on. And he really liked it, and so I finished one up as artwork, and I think he went to show it to the rest of the band, and they said they were very happy with it, and I got my £50, which was what I was paid for doing it. A lot of the artwork then was produced in black and white, and then on layers of film. So the different layers would be nominated a colour, and when it came to printing them, it would then be printed in red and black instead of the 2 layers of black, which is on the artwork.
And he would claim Mick's mouth was not at all an inspiration, but maybe subconsciously. In 2015, Mick would say he had an Indian calendar on his wall. Hindu was huge in the hippie culture in England. Calendars were all over in grocery stores. I'm not clear at all on timeline and have found no concrete evidence when he finished his draft. But he says it took about 2 weeks, non-stop. And it's copywritten in 1970, probably late month December maybe. Here's one of the crossovers. Both Marshall Chess and Craig Braun were childhood friends, and they were close and communicating with each other.
I'm working on the mechanicals, getting the copy, legal copy, publishing, and all that stuff. And we're putting together the album art. I'm putting together. I brought the comps. I told you that Marshall said we're going to go with the zipper, so that was it. So we started putting together these mechanicals. They were multi-panel, huge, like 4 foot by 6 foot. And special sleeve, the whole thing. And I said, Marshall, this is their first release. So is there a logo? Do they have a logo? And he said, Mick's got some kid that goes to art school over there, some art college or something. He told the kid it's not really for the logo for a record company. He told him he wants something for programs or something, sketch pads and stuff. I said probably because Mick doesn't want to pay more than £10 for the logo, probably. So I said, so get it for me. He said, I'm not going to get between him and this kid because they've met 2 or 3 times and this kid is working on it and Mick loves this kid. So I said, can you send me, is there a sketch or anything? Do you have anything? He said, yeah, they gave me this black and white sketch, but it's not the logo, but it's the idea, the idea that it's a tongue and lips. That's it. So I said, can you send me that? So he sends it to me on a thermofax machine. It was already illegible before he sent it on thermofax. So I called my studio guy and I said, come down here. I said, this thing that you see, this little smudge here, this silhouette, I want you to blow it up 12 inches. We're going to try and decipher this. It's a tongue and lips thing, and we're going to try and create one because I was in the mouth of the gun on this thing in terms of getting started with the production. And all the spotlights were on this first release for the Stones and Ahmet Ertegun, everybody. The whole industry was on it. It was just lit up like a Christmas tree. So
now this image from John triggered Braun. He's seen this before. He knew the illustrator named Alan Aldridge. Alan had worked on a Beatles illustrated songbook in 1969.
There was an airbrush illustrator from England named Alan Aldridge, and he did a book called The Beatles Illustrated Lyrics.
Oh, wow.
And that came out about 1.5 years before this project. And I remember that there was a song called Day Tripper that was illustrated by him.
Oh, wow.
And I used that for the inspiration, really.
Oh, wow.
Having no design background, I had to trust, my taste.
Yeah.
And my perception. So here's what that Day Tripper looks like.
Oh, wow.
That came out maybe 1.5 years before the album. So I gave my guys that. I said, listen, let this help you. The highlights on the tongue, the highlights on the lips and everything.
Braun remembered that on the page for Day Tripper, there was a picture of a girl licking a ice pop with lips and teeth and a tongue. Aldridge did not counter anything about this. The book was well known at that time. Allen worked on Rock and Roll Circus. Very interesting timing here. Aldridge was known to use Hindu art in his work. So did he use Callie in his vision of the Beatles' Day Tripper girl? There's so many unknowns. So Braun gets his illustrator down to work on this logo project. Braun would get the illustrators Walter Velez and Tony DiMaselli.
So I said, just let's see what we can do. So they started bringing sketches down to me. I had two illustrators working in tandem on the thing, and I would say, no, let's make the throat deeper and put this little notch in the center of the tongue. And so we went through about 6 or 7, and I said, we got it. So I said, put it into the mechanical as though it's done. It's finished mechanical.
Wow.
I'm going to send it to London, and we're going to get the Stones and Marshall to okay it. So I call in this account guy that I had, Mark Finnell. I said, Mark, you're on a mission. It's got to be a mission possible. The most important thing is that you don't speak.
Braun told the representative that if they say anything about the logo, just tell them I don't know. Braun just told me to bring this to you. Don't even compliment this logo. Just let them respond and review it. And as soon as they say it's okay, have them initial it and get back on that fucking plane. Braun would have anxiety thinking of Mick's response and not approving it and canceling the whole project. So the meeting happened. The rep called Braun right after and said, I'm coming back. It's okay. Now Braun mentions himself that he got paid $300,000. But Braun had to pay all of his team. It was his company called Sound Packaging Corporation. So did Pash create the first image? Braun enhanced it and gave it back to Pash, who created his image again. And when did Pash add his colors of red and black? I can't be certain. This goes back and forth in my head.
When my production guy says, what do we do about the UK? Because I said, I don't want to light this thing up.
Right.
So call the production guy at WEA and tell him this kid is working on a logo that Mick wants, and they don't use inner sleeves there. Their jackets are sleeves.
Right.
No, that's right. They call an album jacket a sleeve. So I said, tell them to do an insert, with the tune lineup and the credits on one side and the logo on the other, the logo and the tune lineup on one side, and the other side use the photograph, this photograph that I put on it. So on the other side of the insert. So here's the logo that I did.
Yeah, it's
I would say I did in collaboration with my people.
Yeah,
that's the logo. So here's the stroke of unfair irony to John Pash.
Pash would get $50 for his original logo, and 200 pounds later, we now come to the third artist, graphic designer, that was involved. Ernie Cefalu claims ownership to the original design, early February 1971. Cefalu graduated art school in 1969, and he went to New York City to work for Madison Avenue. He worked for a small agency, and he worked with their top client, International Paper Company, and he was on a small project called Dolls Alive. International Paper Company had a huge 500 salesperson meeting at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. Cefalu's company was responsible to create the theme for this meeting, along with the entertainment for all. They put together a Rockettes show type with singers and dancers. They would write 10 original songs with the lyrics about paper.
Oh, I'm just wild about paper. I'm like a child about paper.
They would create an album for this event, and Ernie was the one to create the label design used on this album. They would press 500 records and hand this out to the International Paper Company and the salespeople. Now, this concept won some awards for Ernie. Now, with this on his resume, he moves on to a bigger one, Norma Levitt. Decca was their account. Ernie worked on the Jesus Christ Superstar album. After this, he went to sign up with another agency. He had to show him his credentials. And after showing Jesus Christ Superstar, he then said, "Oh yeah, I do have this project also, Dolls Alive."
Is the first usage that I did of the of the lips, and when I was in this meeting showing my work, the guy that owned the agency he just sort of kept looking at this, and I had all this work spread out, and he kept looking at this, and he said, "You know, right now I'm doing I got an assignment to do a Rolling Stones logo, and we've been trying, we haven't come up with anything." He said, "I really like these lips." He said, and he took a piece of paper off his desk, and luckily the paper got stuck in with a bunch of other stuff, and I kept it. But he said, you know, this is right off this. He took a pen. He said, "You know, if you take your lips and you draw a tongue on the outside of this, I think I could sell this to Marshall Chess, who's the manager of the Rolling Stones."
At this time, Braun's creative director got seriously ill, and it was really serendipitous for Ernie with this timing.
And said, "If you could go upstairs and draw me one with the tongue outside and the lips like that, I think I could sell this as as a logo for the Stones." So I went upstairs and I sort of took what he did. I took what I had done a year earlier, and I did a rough sketch of this again, which I didn't get a chance to do, but it was tighter than this. And I went in and showed it to him. He said, "Okay, great. You know, wait here. I'm going to go. I have a meeting."
And Ernie says Braun told him just to wait here in the office while he goes to Andy's studio nearby. And that's where Marshall was at this time. And he showed Marshall, and Marshall loved it and kept the sketch. This time frame was around February 71.
Came back a couple hours later, and I'm still there, and he goes, "Okay, man, you got a job. You get $200, and you just designed the logo for the Stones." So I was really pretty excited too. I just did this logo on everything that you could think of, because what happened was Craig got the merchandising rights for this logo. He gave the logo to the Stones for nothing, and he got the exclusive merchandising rights for 1 year. So we did everything, shirts, posters. I mean, it did these beautiful foil posters that were die cut in that shape with foil and white and black, which was a more stylized version of what I had done. But I actually, honestly, I like what he did better than what I did, because I think that he gave it, mine is very stiff. Mine is very stiff and kind of stayed and kind of...
But original.
Original, but kind of stayed. And it doesn't have any... The Stones are very animated. You know, Mick Jagger is a very animated guy. If you had to describe him in one word, it would be animated.
Lipped.
I wanted to do it straight, because that's what you do when everything's symmetrical. But I knew enough to throw it off so that it would catch your eye. But what John Pache did so brilliantly was take it and make it animated. This is more like... This has more movement and more attitude, in my opinion.
And what year?
This was done. Mine was done at in February of '71, and his was done, I think, a few months later. But what happened was,
there's so many head scratching here as far as timing, who's saying what, who did what, as they all have similarities in visual and color. Now, Ernie says it was his design that was given to Pash. Then Pash did his final version. That's what he says. Ernie has many YouTube videos on this topic with interviews, and he's very vocal about it. So we got John Pash, a logo considered the original, and it's used for 71 for the VIP passes at the Marquee 71 show and the UK and international sleeve design of Sticky Fingers. Craig Braun and his team did the packaging design refined the tongue, and used it on the U.S. sleeve design. Ernie Cefalu, part of Braun's company, he added a version of this tongue logo. It was used for merchandising like keychains, shirts, and also badges and pins. And it was used under Braun's Rock Creation Company. This company was Braun's. It was used for merchandise licensing.
That logo that you saw on my sleeve, well, it was early. It was in early April, and the UK version came out in May.
Yeah.
But whoever was in charge of like choosing a default logo between the two of them, they all wanted this logo that I did.
Right.
They all wanted it, and they used it for everything, for the road, for the tours, for the advertising, all the merchandising. They sell, I don't know, $300 million a year in merchandising. That logo
was
they used. And guess what? I never got a halfpenny in England. That means a half a penny.
Wow.
And I used to say to people back then, I said, you know, this logo, this could be as big as the Playboy logo someday.
Right.
It's dwarfed. The Playboy logo is nothing compared to this logo.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but there's a tongue logo license, and it's under Musidor NV, an Amsterdam-based company. It was founded by the Stones to manage their intellectual property, the logo, trademarks, and portrait rights. What they did was they would fight the counterfeiters and the fakes and protect the Stones. This is interesting. This is from Bill Wyman's website. The 3rd of March, John designed Stone's tongue logo. Braun did not get paid for this version of the lips and tongue logo, but was allowed licensing of the logo through Rock Creations for 3 years till '74. That's all the key rings, jewelry, belt buckles, pins, badges, watches, bags with his Licks logo. John sold his copyrights to the Stones for £26,000 in early the 80s. He did continue after Sticky, making great contributions to rock and roll and the Stones. Ernie created a company called Pacific Eye and Ear. They became a premier source for album design concepts, imagery, lettering, logo, and packaging from 1972 to 86. Ernie would go on to have a fabulous career. Here you could see just a few of his showings. His archives are worth to check out. He did a great job. And Braun continues. Greg made album packaging as a dramatic sensory experience. He also collaborated with plenty of others. Here you see some examples of the early 70s work he contributed to. So when you compare the three lips and tongue logos, John, you see, had a shorter and wider tongue. It's not as defined. It was not the go-to logo, but he is said to be the designer of it. Braun would have the tongue elongated, added black shadowing to the highlights, the throat, added another white highlight on the tongue, and a black outline around the whole image. Given direction from Braun, Cefalu would have his alterations done with a wider mouth, and the teeth are more defined. And inside the mouth shows more black, and a black line going down the middle of the tongue. It's thicker, always reminded me of tonsils. And Ernie's is also two-dimensional looking, not enough depth. Regarding Cefalu, he's always questioned about his varying accounts of the timeline. Now, the flow of the creation of the tongue, you would say that Jagger really initiated it, followed by Pache and Braun. But if you really got to come down to it, this creation is Pache, Braun, Cefalu, Velez, de Missili, Aldridge, and Mick. They should be considered contributors to this collaboration. And nobody remembers which Cali image was used for Mick. Ron expanded this Sticky Fingers album from a 2 to 3-dimensional look, not just for Sticky but for others. He broke barriers, allowing fans to engage with the product. In July the 8th and 9th, Mick would work with Dr. John at his studio sessions at Trident. This was for his album The Sun, the Moon, and Herbs. Mick would sing backing vocals on this track, Were Ya At Mule? A typical New Orleans blues feel. I strain, though, and cannot hear Mick. Clapton, Carl Randall, Graham Bond, Bobby Keys, Jim Price would play on it also.
Did you have a producer on this album, or did you do that aspect of it yourself?
Well, some of the tracks were produced by Jimmy, some of them we did ourselves. Some of them, Glyn Johns was engineering on. Jimmy did a lot of work on it, but didn't do all the tracks.
Did you do this one in the country, or did you do it in the studio?
All over the place, yeah. We did it in the country with a mobile unit. We've got some of them. Some of them did Olympic, some we did in America. Some are quite.
Where did you work in the States?
We can say that, yeah, can't we? Muscle Shoals. We did 3 tracks in Muscle Shoals a long while ago, which we were going to bring out as a single, but then we changed our minds. Which were Brown Sugar, Wild Horses, and You Gotta Move. And we just saved them for this album.
It was between July 20th and 29th the Stones made a formal notification to Decca. They were finished with their relationship and label, considered to be a Stones Independence Day, but at a cost. They fulfilled their Decca contractual obligation and Klein controlled publishing with APCO songs from 63 to 70. The Stones would find out painfully that Klein's contracts left him with the lasting financial leverage, and it was apparent he won out.
If it's all right. Applying yourself to it. You said that, for instance, motion pictures now, you've found that analysis is much more important than
I don't know
it had
anything
been.
really about movies or acting. I mean, it would be absurd for me to talk at any length about either.
Is there such a thing as a natural actor, a person who is observant enough to
Yeah,
be?
I should think so.
Do you think you're that sort of a person?
I don't know, it might be.
You're working with a group of young people, aren't you?
Yeah.
The director, the producer, everyone has kind of a young approach. Is it is there a camaraderie that is very helpful here?
Disorganisation. No, I know them, sort of thing. Which I'm not sure whether that's helpful or not. Because I haven't made enough movies to know whether it's groovy if you know the director personally. Maybe it isn't in some ways, because I can say, come on.
The whole psychedelic thing and the approach to your kind of music is based upon love and gentleness and understanding. Is it not true?
I don't think so.
Because this motion picture, and I guess the slash behind it shows some of the violence that is involved here, right?
Yeah, it's violent. I don't think our music is very peaceful. We never tried to make it peaceful, only very occasionally when one feels in a peaceful sort of frame of mind, which is very rare.
You're frequently in protest against the harsh qualities of life, though, aren't you?
Just protest against things you see in people and in yourself, you know, that you don't like. You have to get rid of.
Are drugs, marijuana, LSD, so forth, necessary to the approach to your way of life?
No, completely unnecessary.
Are they?
You don't need to take any kind of drugs at all. But I mean, you can do.
Have you you've been involved?
Kill yourself if you like.
You've been involved in the campaigns for legalization of marijuana, have you
No,
not?
I've never been involved in any campaign to legalise anything.
Are you in favour of it?
Of legalising marijuana? I can't see why you should put people in jail for smoking it. But, you know, there's so many hassles and problems. But I don't really like laws like you can't do this or that. I mean, you can't drink at 2 o'clock or smoke marijuana at 6 or sell tinned food on Sundays.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Terribly.
And about the future of performance?
Terribly.
The motion picture performance, Mick Jagger. And we're in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
August 3rd is when Mick's movie Performance was released in the U.S. It was taking a long while to release. The film had both British and American censors. They were worried about it being X-rated, or just to ban it. They had to edit out some of the scenes. Now, it was still an X rating in the UK in January of '71. They ended up having to edit out scenes of the film and reorder them just to make it work. Since 1888, a British charity was founded to help poor children who were seriously sick or physically handicapped. It was called the Invalid Children's AIDS Association. So why am I mentioning this? Instead of attending the U.S. premiere August 3rd for Performance, Mick attended a public event in Chester Square for this charity. He was showing support, and he also presented a raffle prize. I'm going to take a step back to March 70. It was in March that the Stones were laying out their 1970 schedule and plans and confirming the steps to move ahead. A tour is planned for Europe, and they have internal talks about which cities to go to. They start communicating with tour managers, booking agents, to find venues and the logistics. Also, at that time, they were initiating their plans to part ways with Klein and Decca and make sure the legal side of this tour is not tainted by them, and to build a new company. In April of '70, they were narrowing down a draft of tentative cities and venues. Also, they discussed ticketing, the regulations, stage setups with the European promoters. In May of '70, the Stones management officially informs promoters the dates and the logistics. They decide July is a good time to start rehearsals, and the set list is a hot topic as they're releasing Get Your Ya-Ya's out on September 4th, 1970. In June, the venues are decided, completed, contract signed. They need a rehearsal time and location. The tour dates are publicly announced, and to let the fans know, the primary work was done locally through press and fan magazines. The stage and sound system is also organized. In July, promotional items are organized for the tour, final rehearsals, hotel equipment being shipped are all confirmed and in action. They rehearsed in several locations August 5th to the 29th. One of the locations was about a half hour south of London in Morden, Surrey. The actual rehearsal location is not really identified 100%. They also rehearsed in London. That would be in Bermondsey, London. If you remember in '68, they purchased or they leased a warehouse, 47 Bermondsey Street. They used this during the Let It Bleed sessions. Here is some footage inside the rehearsal studio with Brian. This is from Catching Fire, the story of Anita Pallenberg, late '68. August 27th and 28th in central London, they would also rehearse at the Lyceum Theatre. A huge step is hiring Bobby and Jimmy on horns. They were busy with Derek and the Dominoes, but that fell apart. And the logo was not used for the '70 tour.
I feel it's very important to stay in the world and do things, but on the other hand, death and dreams are another thing. That that's what I really like to do, is just go off there.
Off where?
Into death. But you can't do that. It's very wrong to make your own death. Your death is when you get it. But I think it's a beautiful thing, then. It's such a relief. I mean, just imagine if there wasn't any death.
Now, before we go into the European tour, it's time to bring in the song that's been in the oven for a bit. Sister Morphine, written in 1968 and 69. Marianne felt her pop songs and lyric writing had left her, and after 67, she lost interest. She did admit she was envious of Mick and Keith and their progress. She'd wanted an attempt to make a new song. Now, with Marianne at this time, she only tried heroin once. Now, when she wrote the lyrics, she was not a junkie. In her autobiography, she would say the lyrics were in her head. She thought deeply about her feelings, about what it might be like as an addict.
Sister Morphine, when I sing it, I actually have a visual in my head, and I see it's like bits from my own sort of movie in my mind. I hear the ambulance. Whenever I sing the line about the ambulance, I have this sort of feeling and this picture of hearing it and being driven to hospital, but I obviously couldn't hear it because I was unconscious. Mick Jagger had this song as a tune. He was playing it in the house when we lived together, and it had no words. And then one day I just decided I was going to write it.
Story of a man who had a terrible car accident and he's dying. He's in tremendous pain. The lyrics are being presented to a nurse. In her book, she hits the nail on the head regarding lyric interpretation. She says you have to be careful what you write down because it's a gateway, and whatever it is you've summed up may come through. It happened with Mick and Keith. Marianne started her lyric writing in Rome, Italy, early '68 with Mick, Keith, and Anita. She was doing her experimentation with opiates and sedatives. Mick was constantly playing a riff there he had in his head for the last 6 months, on acoustic. He was not sure lyrically where it could go. The song was in A minor. And those who know about chords know that this chord leads to a sad and dramatic song. The chord structure Mick was playing built a story for Marianne in her head. She claims that the 17th century English poet John Milton's Lycidas story that had inspired her, a poem about the death of his friend that drowned when a ship sank in the Irish Sea in 1637. Marianne mentions that she was playing a lot of Velvet Underground continuously and believed this sunk in on her head for inspiration, drug references, and its implications. What has always stuck in my mind was, why use the word with sister and morphine? The Greek god Morpheus is the god of dreams or sleep. Does it mean that it's the nurse? She the sister that soothes the patient in pain and feeling he's dying? There's something Edgar Allan Poe about it. Dark. It's almost romantic in its sadness. But Sister Morphine, it's not just a gothic drama. It feels intimate, painful, like someone is quietly asking for an end. As usual, the lyrics can be interpreted in several ways, but chalk it up for Marianne, hitting this one on the gothic head. One that is a sombering listen to, and not played at a festive family holiday dinner for sure. Now let me confirm some fabrication for the line, all the clean white sheets stain red. This was written in July 68 approximately. It does not have to do with Anita Pallenberg on their Brazil trip later in December 68, where they thought Anita was seasick but found out she was pregnant with Marlon, and ending up to have a doctor visit her when they got to Rio. This line was part of the original song. Marianne's lyrics just came out smoothly as Mick wrote the music. Mick did encourage Marianne to keep making albums during the Beggar sessions. Now, before some purists insist and say how Mick says how she wrote a couple of the lines and not sure which ones, it is generally believed Marianne expanded on certain lyrics of Mick's. More to follow on these thoughts, though. In July of 68, when the Stones were working on the Beggar sessions, Mick took the time out in LA to gather Charlie, Ry Cooder, Jack Nitzsche to record Sister Morphine at Elektra Studios. It was an instrumental version, and note who is on bass, and a mistake often made. Bill would do overdubs for his bass portion for the Stones version. And in Rock and Roll Circus, December 11th and 12th, 1968, Marianne was to sing Sister Morphine as a promo. But it was declared that the song was just too risky to play, so Marianne would sing Something Better instead for her single. Marianne and Mick would do the final vocal overdubs early 69 at Olympic in London. So a release single, Something Better, and the B-side, Sister Morphine, in February of 69. It was out only for 2 days. Decca had a panic attack and it freaked out and pulled it off the shelves. Marianne got no explanation or apology. And Mick would visit the head, Sir Edward Lewis, and give his thoughts. Mick got nowhere. It was found out that Decca pulled it due to a drug reference. Must have been secondary complaint, as why was it given an approval for a release and get the go-ahead? Needless to say, Marianne not only had a devastation in November of 68 of a miscarriage, but now this. This single was to be jointly combined with her greatest hits album that was going to be released during 69. Sister Morphine was put on the A-side in some countries like Holland, Italy, and Japan.
And again, it was written out of my direct experience. And it's the direct experience that gets me through it, because I know I can sing Sister Morphine. I wrote it. It belongs to me. It's part of my stuff.
We have here a version that the Stones made February or March in 69 at Olympic. And we get a lyric difference, the second line, which Mick in this early version pleads, please, instead of tell me.
Please, Sister Morphine, when are you coming round again? Oh, I don't think I could wait that long.
This version, you'll clearly hear Keith taking over with the guitar, not Mick. We hear Nietzsche's piano come in on the second verse, as you'll see on the right side, a verse that's not included in the studio cut, but was played here, and Marianne did include it.
All the other patients said they've never seen a man with such pain. Tell me, Sister Morphine, when are you coming round again?
Ry comes in the scream of the ambulance, and Bill's bass also.
The scream of the ambulance is sounding in my ears. Hey, Sister Morphine, how long have I been lying here?
No reverb yet. It's very dry. Some of Mick's enunciations are not made yet. And just when we hear, it just goes to show you, we hear Charlie for the first time.
Just goes to show things are not what they seem. Hey, Sister Morphine, turn my nightmare into dreams.
For the sweet cousin line, he does say please instead of sweet. Mick says, lay your cool hands on my head. Does not say hand. Just some very subtle differences here.
Please, cousin Cocaine, lay your cool hands on my head.
This was the Stones' first shot at the song, leaving it unfinished and shelved. Us deep fans can just shake our head in awe of this early take. It's not certain who brought or suggested this song to be resurrected for Sticky Sessions, but the song's full presentation and its demeanor fits the package and direction that they were headed for. The song spans March 70 to March 71 in the timeline, and Olympic in March to May 1970 is when they opened the door to it again. Mick was working on his vocals, Keith overdubbing with acoustic. The song arrangement and structure is given a refinement, and Jimmy Miller starts planning his ideas for it. In June to July, still at Olympic, they did similar refinement, editing, and figuring out how to layer what was needed, the mixing ideas. In October and the fall, the final arrangements and deciding that this one's a keeper for the album. January to March in 71, the final stages of cleanup, mixing, and maintaining the song. The song's first 57 seconds have Mick and Keith, then we hear Rye.
The scream of the ambulance.
At the 105 mark, when Mick lengthens scream of the ambulance, giving us an enhancement of this mechanical warning horn as Rye interplays with Mick. At 125 comes Bill, and we hear the chilling line, "Why does the doctor have no face?" which perfectly captures a drug-induced hallucinatory delirium.
Why does the doctor have no face?
One of the best lines of the song. It gives you such a visual. At 2:04, I always thought he was saying, "I'm not trying to scold." Yes, it's trying to score. Makes sense now, especially with the reverb at the end.
I'm trying to score.
But this displays Jimmy and the band's brilliance. 2:12, we get Charlie, first bass drum, and he continues on. But let us address that white elephant at 2:17 mark. The sound I really just accepted, but I never questioned. What is this? Yeah, it's that sound behind the slide. The one you hear. Yes, that one. But you can't describe what it is. It adds another Jimmy Miller superior layer to this esoteric feel of the song. I found deep in the heart of geekness, the sound source instrument is most likely a piano, but it's pulled through an echo plate reverb. is called a wet signal. It's generated by Jack's piano, post-production. I talk about the echo plate in my part 2. It gives some eerie sounds, and I put it aside. It really is the true, sinister injection of this song. Aside from the eerie rye slide. The echo plate piano reverb is heard clearly at 350, right after Cocaine, and it continues on.
Sweet cousin Cocaine, lay a cool hand on my head.
Is this a mistake that he caught himself at 4:31? And that outro is wonderful, a jam, and Charlie driving it all. The song's a masterpiece, like they all are. I'm going to end with some deconstructing, and I think you will enjoy the sounds of these.
In my hospital bed, tell me, Sister Murphy, when are you coming round again? Oh, and I don't think I can wait that long. And I know in the morning I'll be there. Yeah, and you can sit around. Yeah, and you can watch all the clean white sheets stay red.
That brings closure to Sticky Fingers Part 4. Part 5 will continue on with the Europe tour, the recordings in the fall, and a few of the songs left for the album, the UK tour, the release of the album. We'll see you next time.